Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonnati. Today I'm going to review A Land Under England by Joseph O'Neill. This 1935 science fiction novel is part of the SF Masterworks line from Gollancz, which is why I read it. I am doing a project to read as many of the SF Masterworks as possible. I had never heard of this book before, or the author, which is probably because Joseph O'Neill wasn't a science fiction writer. He was an Irish educator, and he kind of used the tools of SF to make points in his stories. I think he wrote mostly about politics and such. But I would definitely call this a science fiction novel. I didn't realize when I started reading it how old it was. I thought it was maybe from the 1960s, and then I checked the copyright page and realized this book was written in between the world wars. It was written after World War I and before World War II, and definitely when people could see the rise of fascism and Nazis. This book is absolutely a commentary on basically resisting totalitarian governments and fighting back against the authoritarian state that wants you to not think for yourself and just give in to the very false but soothing solves that a state like that will promise. So what this book is actually about. Initially, I would say it's very similar to Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, except it has better character motivation and a much better plot payoff. But then again, I say that as someone who really disliked Journey to the Center of the Earth. But it is of a similar subgenre of science fiction, which is Hollow Earth science fiction. This idea that somewhere in the bowels of the earth there are entire civilizations, that there's something to discover down there. So this follows a man named Anthony Julian. His family, the Julians, trace their ancestry back to the Roman Empire, and multiple people throughout the generations in his family have been obsessed with the Roman Empire and this idea that somewhere on their land exists a secret door down into a subterranean Roman Empire. Anthony is not obsessed with this idea, but he was raised by his father, who is. Anthony's father is a piece of work. I'll just say that right now. You're told pretty much immediately that the man is obsessed to the detriment of his family, of his wife, and his son. And when Anthony's father returns from active duty in World War I, he's a changed man. He's even more cut off from his family and even more obsessed with finding the secret door. And after some years, Anthony's father disappears. And they kind of think that he got what he wanted, that he did find the entrance to the subterranean civilization. Anthony decides to go investigate himself, and he completely accidentally, in a way that is never fully explained, finds the secret door and begins this journey down into the earth. So most of the book is his descriptions of the underground landscape, and then how he discovers the way that this Roman civilization works, because it does actually exist. The twist is that it's a totalitarian state that uses telepathy and hypnosis to subjugate its citizens and kind of turn them into a hive mind. He refers to most of the people he meets down below as automatons. They're completely blank and unresponsive and just sort of move under the direction of the hive mind. And there are two things that Anthony is doing there. First of all, he's looking for his father. He realizes his father probably made it this far and he wants to rescue him. But he's also trying to escape from the hive mind, which very much wants to absorb him. So for much of the story, he's resisting these attacks on his mind and also resisting these kind of seductive arguments from the hive mind about why it will just be so much better if he gives in, and if he would just give up his mind and his individuality and his freedom of thought and movement, it would all be so much better. He would be so much happier. So I really enjoyed the descriptions of the underground civilization. It's kind of that journey, that kind of quest, and finding out how things work. The descriptions were very interesting. I don't think that much thought went into how exactly people would survive under the earth, but there is some attempt at explaining the basics. The issue I have with most of this book, despite liking those descriptions, despite liking the kind of the tone of the story, which struck me as kind of Victorian, is that it's so tedious. It is really repetitious. It felt like O'Neill would just say the same thing different ways in subsequent sentences. Even entire chapters felt like they were repeating previous chapters. And this is just one of those books where, once again, I'm going to say, if it had had about 100 pages cut from it, if it had been a very sharp and crisp 200-page novella, it would have been fantastic. It would have been more exciting, and the pace of it would have been accentuated, and without all of this repetitious fluff. I'm not actually sure if the repetition is supposed to serve a purpose or not. In fact, now that I think about it, it could, kind of this beating the same information at you again and again, kind of like what's happening to Anthony, but I think it's a bit of a stretch. I think it was just frankly redundant repetition. I also liked the message of the story. I mean, I'm gonna agree with the idea that you should resist mob mentality and not subjugate your will to that of a possibly evil state, you know? Just avoid supporting the tyranny. But I would say that this book's value today is probably knowing the context in which it was written, and that it is definitely a response to what I suspect O'Neill could see happening in Europe while he was alive, while he was writing the book. The rise of fascists, the rise of Nazis. They're even name-checked at the end of the book, so the link there is very clear. The thing that I enjoyed the most about this book is a major spoiler. It's all about how it ends and how it kind of defied my expectations. I usually try to avoid spoilers all the time in my reviews, but this is one thing I really want to mention. So if you don't want to know the end of the book in any way, I'll put a timestamp on the screen so you can skip to it. So I spent most of this book absolutely convinced that Anthony was going to find his father and at the very last minute save him, bring his father back to his senses, pull him out of this telepathic hive mind, away from this mental control, and they would be reunited, and possibly his father would be a better person or have learned his lesson. I was convinced that that was where the story was going up until like the penultimate chapter, I think. And that didn't happen. But I think that the way it ended is part of that argument about resisting this type of control. It's really hard to get out of it when you've been absorbed. Near the end of the story, Anthony finally starts to think about his father in a different way. He's an adult now, and he's suddenly looking back on what he knew of his father when he was a child, what he now can kind of see about his parents' relationship. And I think what happens is that he realizes his father was kind of a weak-willed, self-absorbed ass, and his mother was the one who was always there, who was strong, who had that strength of will and character that his father lacked. That there was this fundamental weakness in his father that everybody tried to overlook, that was taken advantage of by this Roman Empire, basically, and his mother is the strong one instead. So he goes looking for his father, but ultimately he goes home to his mother, and the final line of the book basically is him embracing his mother at home, going back to the person who is there for him, who loves him, who waited, who put up with all of this, basically. I liked the way it ended. I really did. I felt like it could have said a bit more about the strengths of his mother. I mean, his mother is the only female character in the story who's even mentioned more than once, and I wish that there had been more of her in this. I think it kind of it gave short shrift to the women, basically, in this situation. But just the way that it ended, I enjoyed because it defied my expectations, but I also felt like it came around to say something good about the one woman in the story. So to kind of wrap up this book, I think It was a very interesting read. I think there's definitely value in reading it for its message, for that historical context and what it's saying about the politics and the rise of fascism at the time. Definitely interesting to read if you enjoy like that political commentary, political history in your science fiction. I think that it was marred and made a bit tedious by the style, the repetition. I also think that there are some hints of racism and classism in the novel, and I don't know if that's something of the author's opinions leaking through, or if he, as an Irishman, imbued his English character with some of those traits. But there are definitely scenes in the book that I think reek of just casual white nonsense, let's say. And definitely classism is kind of sneering at the lower levels and not really thinking about the realities of their situations, but just blaming them for their lot, basically. So that is Land Under England by Joseph O'Neill. It definitely turned out to be a more interesting read than I expected. I definitely enjoyed it more than I expected, but it is not without its flaws. Let me know if you have read this book, or if you want to, leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.